Welcome to the Bookman Show. I'm your host, James Renford Powell. This is the show that you come to find the what, who, where, when, why, and how you can get your book published. And we will be talking to a number of different authors. We try to get into a little bit about what possessed them to write that book, and maybe some of the problems that they've had in doing so. Some shows we deal with just questions that come from you about what you need to do in your process of becoming a published author. We recently had Father David Knight on the show and talked about hisway.com, which is his website, and his well-known book, His Way. And he is the author of 30 books. So today we want to talk about more of his books and more of the teaching. He has been a priest for 50 years. He's been in the Memphis area for what?
About 40.
About 40 of those 50 years. He's taught at Christian Brothers High School, or at college, and at the Memphis Theological Seminary. And now conducts and is in demand for his retreats and his special training. And in this last show, we talked about the 5 mysteries of baptism, which is very, very interesting, and this was all, and this is in His Way, but you have a lot more detail in another book. What is that?
Yes. See, when I wrote His Way, I didn't know there were 5. I mean, I really hadn't figured that out. 5 mysteries of baptism. I wrote it about prayer, conversion, and community, and later, writing the study book, I realized it was about being a Christian, being a disciple, and then the 3 anointings in the baptismal ritual that nobody pays any attention to. We are anointed priest, prophet, and king. The words are, as Jesus was anointed priest, prophet, and king, so live always as a member of his body. So the 5 steps, I rewrote this 25 years later, explaining the same content that's in His Way, but it's in a more systematic and clear way. There's 5 steps to the fullness.
Now, is this kind of your program that you do built around that, or utilized in that retreat?
Yes, I would call Reaching Jesus my flagship book. It may not be the best, but it's the one that gives the clearest, simplest, most basic explanation of these 5 mysteries, but brought down to life. See, a mystery, you're lifting yourself. You know, that poem, of course you read it in the last show, but the one
David's affirmation.
David's affirmation. You're showing everything from the standpoint of mystery, which is what is lacking. We really dumb down Christianity, and we don't get into the mystery. However, Mahalia Jackson said, some people are so heavenly minded they're no earthly good. Mm-hmm. And if you don't get these mysteries down to concrete living, what good are they? So I think you have to have both.
And it's really interesting that when the apostles asked Jesus why he taught in parables, yes, you know, of course he said their ears are dull of hearing and their eyes are closed, and he goes on to talk about that. But then he turns and he says, but to you I have revealed the mysteries.
Yes, yes.
And when you look at the Apocalypse of John, and apocalypse doesn't mean end of time. People like to use it apocalyptic
That's right.
this and apocalyptic that. It simply means revelation. So this is the revelation of his mysteries.
Yes.
And if we know how to interpret that, this is the understanding that I have in it, and that's what I'm trying to bring out.
And you've gone very deeply into that.
I've studied that quite a bit. The mysteries, at what point did this become this?
Okay. Well, 25 years later, I wrote His Way, and I was giving missions and retreats and preaching this. And after a while, I realized I really need to, first of all, it became clearer in my own mind. It's just sort of all gelled down. So 25 years later, the publishers asked me if I could rewrite His Way. I didn't think I could, so I wrote another book instead, and wrote Reaching Jesus, that explained the 5 steps.
And when you say became aware, it makes me think about when I got my CRV, my Honda CRV. I didn't ever pay any attention to all these cars. Everybody makes a box on wheels. whether it's Mercedes or Honda. But once I got one, then I'd go to the red light, and there's a CRV on my left and on my right, and one coming. It wasn't because they were making more CRVs, it's just that I'd become aware of them.
That's right.
So really, you're saying that what you had written here, you're really becoming aware of.
Yes.
Yes. It's really soaking in.
That's right.
Internalizing, you might say.
Oh, see, I think what's lacking is spiritual formation. Now, formation, I've got a real cute little phrase. It is it is reiterated instruction with insistent intentionality, which is a lot of baloney to say. You keep saying the same thing until it sinks in and becomes a constant awareness. Until all these mysteries have become my constant awareness, I'm not formed. And of course, that also has to be put into practice. So you have to keep doing it until it becomes your life.
And when as children and young people in school, we kind of disdain repetitive things, but in fact, that repetition is the best teacher.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. Absolutely right.
And that's the reason for certain litanies, I would assume.
Yes, yes.
Do you conduct Mass here?
Well, we call it preside. Catholics say the priest says Mass, gives Mass, offers Mass, and that's all bad. The priest presides at Mass because it's the celebration and the activity of the congregation, and the priest is presiding over what they're doing. I insist on the word because you can't preside over something you do all by yourself, and all sorts of Catholics think the priest can say Mass all by himself, and he's the one doing things, and they're the spectator. So I preside every day at the Monastery of St. Clair. I have Mass every day, and then Sundays it's open to the public.
Now, when you are having the retreats, then you've got good number. What kind of numbers come to Mass? Just on a regular Sunday basis.
Well, normally I go out to parishes, and so whatever their regular number is, that's what comes. When I have things at the house, those are usually very small groups, unless it's the retreats in Spanish. Now, this group of Spanish that have this prayer group, they started these evangelization retreats. They announce it at Mass at St. Michael's Church on Sunday. By Tuesday, it's filled up. And they came and said, we can't get everybody in your dining room. Can we knock down a wall and make it bigger? And they showed up at 8 o'clock in the morning, 20 men, worked till midnight, came back the next day, which was Sunday, and worked. I gave them permission. And worked until 9 o'clock at night. We had Mass there. And they just totally renovated this place and built a whole new corridor, renovated it. Yeah. So the numbers, most in Spanish, our numbers are big.
Now, do you speak Spanish?
Yes.
So this kind of led to your developing a Spanish ministry then?
Yes. I like Spanish, and I've been celebrating Mass in Spanish since 1961. And I preached in Spanish every day, every Sunday for 14 years. And I just love it. And I like the people, so it's kind of a good mix.
So with the coming of more Spanish immigrants into Memphis, I can remember about 10 years ago, one of my friends who's from Peru says, he was actually bragging, he said, we have 2,000 Hispanics in Memphis, and we have this and we have that. And now there must be 200,000 if there's any.
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows. Yeah. And Frazier somehow or another became a kind of a center there, because just up the road from that abbey, you've got another large Catholic church.
Yes, Our Lady of Sorrows Church on the way to Millington, right there in Memphis, of course. And they have a Mass in Spanish every week. Sometime I celebrate that.
Yeah. Do you go over like to St. Louis over on White Station?
I go pretty much anywhere where they're missing a priest, somebody's on vacation. Haven't been to St. Louis much. I go a lot to the cathedral. I go a lot to OLS.
Now the cathedral is over on Peabody?
On Central, yes,
Central.
near Peabody,
Central.
yes. I'm actually Conception. So I go to different churches. But, mostly I'm right there in Frazier.
Doing your thing?
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, listen, we're going to take a little bit of a break here. We're going to do the Poet's Porch as usual, and then we'll come back for the second half of the show with Father David Knight. Stay with us. James Renford Powell, and this is the segment we call the Poet's Porch. And in honor of our guest, Father David Knight, and he's talking about the Lord's Prayer and the 5 parts of it that he's mentioned to us, and we'll be expanding on a little bit later. But this is called the Affirmation of Jesus. So this is a little bit of a metaphysical interpretation of the Lord's Prayer. Universal being, the first cause, I acknowledge as the source of all, and in all being as a whole, as evidenced in the law of being. What is above is reflected below in the material realm. I acknowledge universal being as the source of all life, the supreme source of light. I recognize that for the kingdom to be expressed by me, I must find it within, acknowledge its power, and be ready to accept its presence, and that I must give up the will of ego to receive it. I acknowledge the divine self-expression, the will of universal being expressed through the life force. I recognize that the divine self-expression is within me. I acknowledge that the bread of life is understanding, and that there is understanding in abundance for those seeking first the kingdom within. I acknowledge that all needs may be fulfilled through the law of attraction and the law of abundance. I acknowledge the oneness of all being, and I reject the temptation of doubt and fear with the knowledge of my access and connection to universal being. I will avoid wrong thought that leads to wrong action, because the power to withstand the power of fear, anger, and hatred is the power of the universal source within me. I must seek forgiveness and understanding for the wrong committed against another being from that being. I will forgive myself, which is the ultimate forgiveness. With self-understanding, I can do this. I will search within. I will test myself to the depths. I will root out selfishness in my search for eternal understanding. I accept responsibility for self and know only I can conduct the necessary work on self. Only I can deliver myself from the grip of fear and wrong thought. Only constructive thought will manifest constructive results. I acknowledge that the ultimate source of life is the eternal being, and that I must fulfill my purpose for the fulfillment of the divine self-expression. That's the affirmation of Jesus. We'll be right back with Father David Knight and the last half of the Bookman Show. Welcome back to the Bookman Show. This is your host, James Renford Powell. I hope you enjoyed the Poet's Porch today, and we'll be talking again very shortly with Father David Knight, who's our guest, who is the author of 30 books. He's taught at Christian Brothers College at our university, at the Memphis Theological Seminary, and conducts retreats from the Monastery of St. Clair in Fraser. And we'll be back and talk with them in a moment. I want to be sure that you remember that you can go to the internet and go to Blog Talk Radio. That's BLOGTALK radio.com/Renford. And that will take you to that's RENFORD, and that'll take you to the homepage of the RBR network. We have 5 shows there. At 6:30, it's Pam Drinnon with her Cosmic Contact show. At 8 o'clock, it's Keith Blanchard with the Searcher's Roadmap. We also have a show on Tuesday called the IAM-Well show. We have a new host coming for that shortly. And then on Wednesday night, it's the No Show, the KNOW show. And as I always say, you don't want to be a no-show on the No Show, because there's a lot of things on that show you want to know. And also on Thursday at 5:30, it's Darryl Clark from New York with his Progressive News Weekly, a current event and current issues type of show. That's 5:30 Central Standard Time. Also, remember, this show comes to you on Saturday evenings at 9:30, Channel 17, Comcast Cable Network. We will be putting these shows in archives as all of the radio shows are archived. When you go to that blogtalkradio.com/Renford to the RBR network page, every show for the last 3 years is archived there. You can find them. You can actually go in there and find our guest today. Father Knight has been on one of the shows of the RBR network. Also on our website, IAM-COR.org, you can find a number of ebooks that are free downloads: the Searcher's Roadmap, the Core Document, the Unity Principles, and the Lightways e-zine. And this is a 25-page color magazine. And in the magazine, there's a directory of the guest on this show and on the RBR network shows. So you can find people in there that you would like to hear their show, and you can listen to it that way. They're all archived there. These shows will also be archived on that website in a section, I think it's called Media Corner or something like this. You can find it, and you'll be able to listen to or watch any of these Bookman shows there. Also, I want to invite you to go to thelawsofmaterialwealth.com. That's thelawsofmaterialwealth.com, and find out about a personal development program that I've spent some years developing. It's a book, a workbook, 4 DVDs, a CD, 4 DVDs, a CD, 3 outline commentaries, and 108 weeks of support material and online coaching. This is a proactive, interactive, ongoing personal development program that you can utilize within whatever religion that you may espouse. And this is a program of study that is self-verifiable. It's one that you can be sure that you'll never be sitting in a coffee shop wondering what hit you. You'll be enjoying your coffee. Or listen to a speaker, and you'll know where he's coming from. Read a book, you'll know where they're coming from, whether it's from academia, from dogma, or whether it's from the experiential. And what we need is that experiential. We need to find that individual that way that we know that that person was where we are and is now where we want to go. Okay? So keep these things in mind. Let's get to our guest, Father Knight. I'd like to get into a little more detail on this book, this awareness shift, this paradigm shift from his way to
reaching Jesus.
Reaching Jesus. Yeah.
Well, what I realized finally through his way of talking about it, what I'm all about and feel called to do is promote spiritual growth, as opposed to a religion of just keeping in bounds where I don't commit any sins and just do all the right things. You got to be moving forward. Now, if you're going to move forward, you have to know what steps to take. You can't just go somewhere. You have to take steps. So, reaching Jesus takes the 5 mysteries of baptism that are, well, they're very profound, and you can go very sublime about it. But it brings them down to earth. And we say, look, the very first step is relationship with Jesus Christ. You want to know Christ, interact with Christ, deal with Christ, talk to Christ, make him a friend. So, and that's mostly awareness, being aware that he's with you and able to work with you and wanting to work with you. That's step 1. Now, if you want to form a friendship with Christ, you obviously have to get to know him. Friends are people who get to know each other. So you become a disciple. You go from Christian to disciple. Very few Christians are disciples of Jesus Christ, because the word disciple does not mean follower of Jesus. It means a student of Jesus. And if you are not studying at the feet of Christ now, you're not a disciple. And since you can't graduate till you die, if you're not a disciple, you're a dropout. And most Christians are dropouts. So this is where I say you just have to read the Bible. If you don't read his words and you don't think about his words, how in the world can you say you're a disciple of Jesus Christ? So, reading the Bible. The third step is the one that people kind of balk at a little, because the first two, well, that's self-development, people like that. Third one is to become a prophet. And you say, what's a prophet? Well, a prophet is someone who professes the faith. Okay, fine. But not in words only, because nobody believes words. You profess the faith in actions. Like somebody said, in the eyes of God, our words have only the value of our actions. When you begin living a lifestyle...
That's that experiential I was talking about.
That's it, yes. That poem you read, I told you at the break, these 5 steps are right in there. I could build a whole mission, a whole retreat just on that point. You have, and so could you. But see, so when you start making, when you say, okay, if I'm going to bear witness to Jesus Christ, I'm going to have to change things in my lifestyle. And when you commit to that, then you become a prophet. And when you really get down to earth in it, you really want to get concrete, look, do this. Promise God you'll keep making changes in your lifestyle. Don't promise big ones. Don't promise to make all the changes you think he wants. Be real. Just say, Lord, all I'm saying is I'll keep making changes. And I won't tie myself down to a schedule.
It's that intent there when things start to happen, isn't it?
That's right. And if you make changes motivated by the desire to make everything you do bear witness to Christ, you don't ask anymore what's right and wrong. You say, how does this bear witness to Christ? That's the third step. And that's the one where people tend to hesitate a little bit, because it's getting down to where you live now. The fourth step, this appeared very beautifully in that poem. I wish I could remember the words. The fourth step is to be priest, meaning a person who ministers. Everybody who's baptized is a priest. There's only one priest, Jesus. And if we share in his ministry and his priesthood, we minister to others by trying to help everybody we deal with, but not help them. You had this in your poem. You're letting God help them through you. It's God in you, Jesus in you. You surrender to his action, and being a priest mainly means every person you deal with, you try to let Jesus Christ in you express his truth and his love through your words and actions. You don't use words, I buttonhole people and try to preach Christian doctrine to them. It's just that if you treat people the way your faith tells you that Jesus would, you don't have to talk about it. And they might ask you about it, and then you can explain it. But ministry to every single person, that's step 4. And step 5 is to accept your baptismal consecration as king, or I keep it, gender non-specific, steward of the kingship of Christ. You are responsible. Do you notice the word responsibility at the end of that poem? You are responsible for establishing the reign of God on earth. And you have to take that responsibility. So, but it's not just you yourself. You're letting God do it. You're doing it with hope in God, because it's hopeless to try to change society, change the culture. We can't reform anything. We can't reform business, politics, the church, the school system, the prison system. But we believe that God can, and that God will through us, because Jesus has conquered the world, invisible as that may be. So this last step is to give yourself to the work of transforming society and cultures with persevering hope that Christ is acting through you, and you keep doing it until he comes again. That's step 5.
And one who is writing, especially nonfiction. I mean, we have authors that have written novels and cookbooks and children's books and so forth, but especially nonfiction writers, don't you think that most of them really feel like that they have something that people ought to know about?
Yes.
They have this. I remember at the college I went to in biblical studies, and they said if you can keep from preaching, don't preach.
yes.
In other words, it has to be something that you just are compelled to do. And I think writing a good book is a lot like that too. It's you're just compelled to tell. You're compelled to share.
Yes. And that's the secret to good writing. I don't think it's style and having a bunch of words. It's having something to say and wanting to say it.
Now, you said you've never had writer's block, so so you must have been overflowing from the abundance of your giving there.
Plus my family's a bunch of talkers.
Oh, are they? Where was the family? We've got a few minutes. We can talk about personal things.
Dallas, Texas. My mother was a Catholic. My father was a Baptist, but his father was a Methodist. And our family tradition on his side goes back to my grandfather's grandfather, who was a Methodist campground preacher in Shelbyville, Tennessee.
Really?
And the old night campgrounds is where he's buried, and the old night campground road is still there, and I've seen his grave.
Named after the Knight family.
Yeah,
Yes.
it wasn't after him, really. William Knight was a preacher. And I swear I can pick up Methodist tones in the way of speaking of my father, my grandfather, my uncles. I think he just gave his style of speaking to the whole family. I was told once after a mission, I was preaching in a church, in a Catholic church, the man came up afterward and said, "You said your father was a Baptist." He says, "I've been a Baptist." He says, "I knew there had to be some Baptist in you somewhere."
Yeah. But is some of that Methodist coming out in your lessons
Yes.
as well?
Yeah. If I were Pope, the first thing I'd do is canonize John Wesley. I would make John Wesley, who started the Methodist Church, a Catholic saint, and let the Methodists figure out what they're going to do about it.
And are there any others that you admire so much like that, like John
Yes.
Wesley?
In his way, I make a big thing of John Woolman, who was a Quaker. Fantastic man. He was the first. He was the one that got the Quaker Church to abolish slavery. I don't know of any other church that did, certainly not before him. But John Woolman just couldn't feel comfortable with slavery.
Was anything written about him? Woolman? Or did he write anything himself?
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. His diary. He has the journals. If there is, it's in his way. I've got reference to him, and I can't tell you right now what the book is.
And remember, you can get Father Knight's book at hisway.com, which is the name of his center, spiritual center, and the name of this particular book, one of the two primary books that we've been talking about. And who else besides?
Well, we're in Memphis. Martin Luther King. Now, Martin Luther King was a man who got whites and blacks together because he put up in front of them an ideal you could not refuse if you were a Christian. I know we did for a long time, but conversion takes place, right? But he said, we are brothers and sisters. How can we not be brothers and sisters? So he's a hero. Rosa Parks, he talked about Christian witness. She went out on a limb all by herself. Can you imagine how terrifying that would be to just be the first person who refused to sit in the back of the bus?
We've taken up another show, Father Knight. So, I don't know. Maybe we'll do another one here soon, okay?
Good.